Good morning, everybody. How are you all? Great to see you back for the latest of the Faster Project webinars. Today, we're going to be looking at electric fleets. We've got some incredible fleet managers with us, quite a diverse range that we'll be talking to in just a minute, and also some fantastic retailers and leasers of electric vehicles across Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Republic of Ireland. So if you're looking to get into electric fleets, they'll be able to sort you out. And we're also joined as well by Michael.seaword from Home Energy Scotland. Don't let the home fool you. Michael is the fleet incentive expert in Scotland, and I will be covering Zero Emission Vehicles Ireland's funding details for you, since everybody is at the EV Summit in Dublin today, at which point half the attendees go, oh shoot, and disappear off so that they can join that remotely. But before we proceed with electric fleets, of course, this is the Faster Project, so it would be remiss of us not to to have an update on where the project's at today. We're joined by Sharon Digby, who will be able to give us an update on the latest progress.
Thank you, Euan. Yes, delighted to report that the project is progressing well. We've had some substantial movements since the last webinar. Our Scottish counterparts have completed their procurement for their supplier to install their 24 charge points in Western Scotland. They're just today actually finishes the standstill period that they have to comply with in relation to their procurement for the appointment of the company. So in the next couple of days, we'll hopefully have the press release and the announcement there on their appointment. So it's all full steam ahead with Western Scotland. Next then is our Republic of Ireland, our 25 charge points there. They have just completed their procurement for their final multidisciplinary design team, who will basically do the final design on the sites for ROI. They will then do the main procurement, drop the main procurement documents for the appointment of the supplier in ROI, and handle the whole process through to completion. So they are just finished the scoring of their procurement, and they will hopefully be announcing following their standstill period the company who's successful there. And in Northern Ireland, they are finalising their procurement documents for their multidisciplinary design team, who will do pretty much the same role as ROI. And they're just finalising those documents and getting their getting those run over by the relevant procurement agencies just before we can put those live, but hoping that will be ready now in the next fortnight as well. In terms of behavioural change work that Donald you'll be familiar with in the project, the Save Today, Save Tomorrow campaign is continuing across Western Scotland, ROI, border counties and NI, and that obviously involves the billboards, ad shell advertisement, radio advertisement and press advertisement. And we've also just appointed Rumour Mill company to carry out YouTube advertising. So the promotional videos that you would have seen throughout the project that Euan and Rick from Generate Media have been creating, they will be promoted now through the YouTube advertising contract as well, which will increase the traffic of those. And then Donald's also working on an event program for next year for spring, summer. So a lot happening and very busy.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that update, Sharon. It's all coming together quite nicely from the sound of things. So we've got a busy panel session, as you can see today. Just before I introduce all of the panelists, I'm keen to know more about you. Who's joining us today? So Sharon, if possible, could we share poll 1, please? So that's going to be basically seeing who we've got in the audience with us today. And whilst we're doing that, I shall introduce the panel that we have with us today. We've got Jim Blair from Arnold Clark Vehicle Management, and also from the Arnold Clark Innovation Centre, which features very heavily in those Faster Project EV review videos that Sharon alluded to earlier. We've got Gareth Pinkerton from Etrux, which is an all-in-one electrification service provider. We'll find out more about this. Obviously, kind of specialising in the Northern Irish market as well, which is it's very much its own thing, as the Faster Project knows all too well. So yeah, very interested to find out more. We have Michael.seaword from Home Energy Scotland, as I said, a fleet mobility specialist, including funding and incentives that are available exclusively to Scottish fleets and also across the UK as well. We have Keith Bradbury from Ember, which is an incredible company that runs electric intercity buses. We'll go into that in a bit more detail in a minute, but yeah, fantastic company, big fan. We have Aaron Callaghan from Lease Plan Ireland. So again, fleet electrification experts who can provide electric fleets to businesses in the Republic of Ireland. And we have Bruce Moffat from East Lothian Council, who is the fleet manager there at one of the most proactive local authorities in Scotland, without a doubt. And then last but not least, definitely, we have the triple Guinness world record holder that is the physics-defying Kevin Booker. You know, the miles per kilowatt hour that Kevin can get out of any EV is just, it should be illegal, quite frankly. And also, you know, having been a fleet manager who's electrified a somewhat difficult to electrify fleet in a very rural area, he's now kind of branched off into consultancy and all sorts. So we'll find out more in a minute, but obviously today's focus is on the electric fleets. So let's have a look at who's joining us. We do have some fleet managers with EVs. We've got some fleet managers who are looking into electrification, but we've also got quite a few kind of other in the chat. So I'd be interested to find out, if you stick in the chat, if you put other, who are you, who's joining us today? Because it could well be that you may be of use to fleet managers looking to begin their journey. So for, oh, there we go. Sorry, I've just realized that I wasn't sharing the results. That was stupid of me. There we go. So now you can see. But yeah, tell us more about yourselves in the chat. But yeah, in terms of fleet managers who've already gone electric, I'll start with yourself, Bruce. Tell us more about East Lothian Council's electric fleet. How many vehicles have you got? How many miles have they travelled? When did you start switching them to electric? Those are the top three questions that I have to begin with for our fleet managers today.
Thanks, Euan. Yeah, so East Lothian Council, for anyone who's not seen us before, we're quite a small semi-rural authority based on the southeast of Scotland there. Infrastructure-wise, we've grown that quite considerably over the years through a lot of work through Ryan Robertson and our team. But fleet-wise, we currently operate 39 EVs on the fleet, of a fleet of 322 vehicles. That progression started in 2012. Very small scale, Transport Scotland funding, and generated that through to 2017-18, where we really started to accelerate that programme for us. So and take on the pool car model EV usage and really drive the utilisation of the council users and try and incentivise people to get into EVs and actually start using them. Quick calculation this morning, we're averaging around 200,000 miles per annum in our EVs. COVID had a bit of an impact on that, so we expect to see that grow. I certainly in the next couple of years, I see that expanding quite rapidly across our fleet. Yeah, so that's kind of us in a small nutshell just now.
Nice one. So that was, did you say, was it 200,000 miles per annum in your electric vehicles at the moment? So that's across the entire fleet.
Yeah, that's in only the 39 EVs that we've currently got just now.
Yeah. And now on that note, let's have a chat to Keith, because that figure, 200,000 miles, sounds very familiar for your electric buses, doesn't it? But it was with a considerably smaller number of vehicles. Tell us more about what your buses are doing at the moment.
So we're operating buses intercity. So we're currently running from Dundee to Edinburgh or Dundee to Glasgow, and have plans to launch some routes up to Inverness and Aberdeen and some other routes across the country. And our vehicles, so they're Yutong electric coaches, and they're doing about 200,000 miles per year each. So a single vehicle is doing, we generally measure in kilometers, but I don't know, it's one of those strange reasons, but we do it. And so we're doing about 1,000 kilometers, nearly 1,000 kilometers a day, somewhere between 900 and 1,000 per vehicle per day. And what that means is that we're rapid charging 4 times per day. So typically a vehicle will be doing 4 trips per day, 4 return trips per day. And in between it's charging, the charging speeds that we get are typically up to 150 kilowatts. And we have plans to kind of build much faster charging. So we've built some of our own charging infrastructure. We're using Alpatronic chargers for that, 300 kilowatt chargers, but ultimately we're limited slightly by the CCS spec. And so we're now installing pantograph charging as well. And our new vehicles are coming with pantograph charging. So those ones will be able to charge at, we don't know because we haven't tested, but somewhere in the region of 300 to 500 kilowatts, which kind of really means that you can turn a vehicle around very quickly. So it can come, it can do a return trip, it can go back to base. do a quick charge, in under an hour, can basically have a full charge, and then be back out on the road. And ultimately, our thesis for the entire business is that we want to be using these buses as much as possible. And we want to be proving that they are reliable and that they can be used 24/7. So we operate a 24/7 timetable. We run every day of the year, including Christmas Day. And pretty much at any point during those 365 days, we've got a vehicle which is driving or charging. And that applies to all of the vehicles within our fleet. So that's a kind of a brief summary.
Well, I'm sure that the audience is still piecing together the bits of their minds that you've just blown with how much of a runaway success.
Maybe as a sort of example, we there's a lot of talk in the sort of EV world about things like battery degradation, charge cycles, rapid charging, what does it do, things like battery temperatures. So these are all things that we have been monitoring since we began. And that's actually just over 2 years ago that we first launched with 2 buses. And those 2 vehicles have now done well over 500,000 kilometers, have been through 3,000 charge cycles, charging at somewhere like 130 kilowatts every single day. They have LFP batteries in them. And from our sort of best guess, based on the data that we've got, is that they're roughly around 10%, 11% degradation. And so it sort of gives you an idea when people are talking about cars and doing, 100,000 miles or something in the lifetime of a car. We've done 500,000 kilometers in 2 years, and we're looking at 11% degradation, which really just isn't that bad, ultimately.
No, exactly. It's not affecting the bus's abilities to do those journeys, is it? You had quite a substantial amount of reserve on the round, because that's the point. Is you're not charging at Edinburgh and then at Dundee, for example. You are doing Dundee to Edinburgh and back on one charge, aren't you? And there's still plenty in reserve. Yeah. Also, for any naysayers out there saying that, because you mentioned LFP, lithium iron phosphate, one of my favorite stats is when you get people on Twitter saying, oh, electric vehicles are bad because they use cobalt. There's actually more cobalt in the smartphone that was used to tweet that than there is in Ember's electric buses because they don't have any cobalt. So there you go. But actually, that's kind of jumping ahead. I was going to come back and talk about kind of fleet reliability and so on later on, but that is a fantastic teaser for later in the webinar. So thank you very much for that. And of course, well, Kevin, tough act to follow, but then again, very impressive what you've been doing with electric fleets. So tell us more about when you started to electrify them, what you electrified, how you went about electrifying those, because it was in a very rural, difficult to electrify location, wasn't it?
Yeah, so we started back probably 2016 was the first electric vehicle I was involved in, when we put 2 i3 range extenders on there just to get people used to them. But being a rural area, there was no charging infrastructure. So we had to build within the Brecon Beacons National Park Authority, we had to build that infrastructure. So, and then working with sort of different partners to get the charging infrastructure and to get the vehicles. But, up to when I left there, we actually have 4 Konas, 1 MG5 EV, load of plug-in hybrids. They've just finished the electric events van. So we've got a van specifically to go to events to promote national parks, which is purely electric with a solar panel on the top and it's a separate battery storage thing, weirdly, which we had to put a warning saying the vehicle contained lithium-ion batteries, was transporting them, which I found amusing since it was an electric van. You had to put an extra safety sticker on because of the battery pack for the events. And basically, it's just kind of building the infrastructure. There's now 27 chargers within the national park, and a lot of those are publicly accessible, but we didn't do it in isolation. So we actually added solar to each of the sites as well to try and take the edge off charging, and made sure they were all, the green energy suppliers, as it were, just to kind of make that. And I think when I looked at the stats a couple of weeks ago, they do about 60,000 miles purely electric a year, which is not bad. The only thing we've got left, which we haven't electrified yet, are the pickup trucks, because there aren't any pickup trucks. But they've even made inroads into that, which our go-to vehicle was the plug-in hybrid Outlander, because even though it has a very unique use case scenario, the distances we go aren't necessarily massive, so it can do a lot of that on battery, and is twice as efficient on fuel as the Toyota Hiluxes it's covering.
Nice one. Actually, when you mentioned the electric pickups, a couple of things spring to mind. So over in the States, there's the Ford F-150 Lightning electric pickup. The sooner that they bring that here, the better. But if you're in the States, then there is a very good electric pickup truck that you can choose from. Rivian, their electric pickup trucks will eventually come to the UK, but there's also, is it Maxus who've produced a pickup truck too?
Yeah.
Electric
we did look
truck.
at the Maxus. Unfortunately, it's only available in rear-wheel drive at the moment.
So
it's so the pickup trucks within the park are used properly for off-road work, so it needs to be a full off-roader. And the biggest thing is we've got some quite heavy plant, so it does need to be able to tow over 3 tons.
If anyone from Munro EV in East Kilbride near Glasgow is listening right now, then their ears have just pricked, because Munro EV have an absolute beast of an electric 4x4, 3.5 ton towing capacity. And it basically takes a Land Rover Defender down a dark alleyway and duffs it up. It is an absolute beast of a machine. So genuinely get them to check out the Munro. I know that that's a 4x4 rather than a pickup truck, so it would need to have a trailer or something like that. But oh my goodness, what an absolute beast of a machine. So I
was in talks with them to get a demo one. So
oh, nice. There we go. But that gives you the audience, a bit of a cross section of the types of vehicle and the types of people who are electrifying their fleets. I've deliberately chosen 3 of the kind of tougher to electrify kind of fleet options today. Like stupidly high mileage or very remote and kind of rugged terrain and so on, and kind of high use. So that just shows, if they can do it, then there's a very good chance that you can too. But if you are actually, that kind of brings us on neatly to poll 2 before we move on. So in terms of any fleet managers, in fairness, there were some fleet managers present here today, but Sharon, if you're able to share poll 2, please. We're interested to find out when you first added EVs to your fleets. And in fairness, even if you're not officially a fleet manager, if you're part of a company that has started to electrify, then it'd be interesting to see when those vehicles were added, and indeed fellow panelists, if you fancy having a sort of cheeky vote on that, if you're able as well, just to kind of clarify. It's actually quite an interesting mix coming through. So I'll give you 10 more seconds to answer that, and then we'll share the results. But it kind of looks like, in Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, when we use Ask the Audience on like the £250,000 question, like just there's no consensus on it whatsoever. Nobody knows the answer. And in this case, look, there's a really good kind of split right across the board. So a few of you who've been electric for more than 5 years, a few of you who've only just gone into the kind of electric side of things, and then a kind of decent spread throughout. So that's interesting, because those of you who started longer ago had it more difficult because of the the lower range and the sort of less choice that was available, but now you're really spoiled. Interesting stuff. But in terms of when it comes to procuring electric fleets, so what is how can you go about it? I think if we start, of course, with outright purchase options, Jim, that will be no doubt one of your specialities at Arnold Clark Vehicle Management. So for any fleet managers looking to buy electric vehicles, tell us more about the process and what's available to them.
Well, fundamentally, the process for electric vehicles is really the same as traditional ICE vehicles. We've always taken the view that we're pretty much agnostic. What the market demands, we will sell. If that's electric vehicles, then we'll sell them. If it's hydrogen vehicles, we'll sell them. But far and away, electric vehicles is really the only game in town just now as far as renewables is concerned. And fundamentally, the range is improving, the choice of car is improving. Vans are a wee bit behind. I would say vans are probably 2-3 years behind where cars are, and they can be a bit of a challenge just now.
Oh, you've accidentally muted yourself, Jim. You were saying about vans, kind of 2 to 3 years behind, you were saying, with the vans.
Yeah, I think we've got a wee bit to go in vans. Range, I think, still remains a bit of a problem. The choice of van as well needs to be improved, but we're getting there. We're, as I say, where we were with cars 2 or 3 years ago. So vans is getting better, but the actual procurement process is fundamentally the same. To quote Lorna McAteer, right vehicle, right job, right time. And that's entirely right as far as fleets are concerned. So it's a case of making sure that people will either come to us with a specific vehicle in mind, or they'll come to us looking for advice. And that advice might be, do I buy or do a lease? Or it might be, can you advise what's the best vehicle for this particular job? So as far as consultancy and procurement is concerned, we don't really look at electric vehicles any differently from any other vehicle. The advice might be different depending on the business case, but it's very difficult these days in the car world to think of a business case where an electric vehicle doesn't fit. There is actually an extreme case we had a few months back where a fleet where drivers are doing 50,000 miles a year. And in that scenario, we'd advise the customer to basically stay with ICE, because that's pushing it a little bit from a business perspective. But the vast majority of people, whether it be consumers or fleets doing reasonable mileages, there's an electric vehicle out there for everybody now. So it's just a case of finding the one that you need that fits your particular business case.
Very true. Before we move on, you mentioned Lorna McAteer. Good shout. Definitely one of the most famous fleet managers, particularly for electric vehicles. In the UK, she's from the National Grid. And I can tell you now, if it wasn't for the fact that she was too busy being awesome today, she would definitely be on this panel. But you raise a good point about the kind of procurement process for electric vehicles, and the fact that obviously there is so much choice out there and there is something that suits everyone. In terms of, well, in most cases, in terms of public sector versus private sector, is there a difference in the way that a company like Arnold Clark Vehicle Management would go about the procurement process for, say, a local authority versus, a private business that has a fleet of pool cars, for example? Is there anything different that these different sectors need to be aware of, or is it pretty much the same process?
I think public sector definitely led the way with electrification. Things like the Switched On Towns and Cities Fund from the Scottish Government helped or promoted electric vehicles within public sector. So they certainly were pioneers. And if we'd had this call probably about a year ago, the vast majority of our orders would have been in the EV space, would have been in public sector. Today, that's not the case. Businesses are catching up very quickly. And fundamentally, the process is now the same. It's basically identifying any grants that are available to help lower the cost of acquisition, any help that can be provided in terms of charging. And again, from our sales department perspective, they kind of get dragged kicking and screaming into this discussion about charging infrastructure, because when fleet managers come to us looking for advice, they're looking for advice not just about the car, but it's the whole infrastructure that goes along with it. So we've got partnerships with a variety of companies to help us answer those questions and provide a kind of one-stop shop solution.
Excellent. That's really good to know, actually. And in terms of the grants and incentives, we'll come to Michael on that in a little bit. But leasing, obviously, is another option that's available. And obviously, the Republic of Ireland is a somewhat different market. So, Aaron, tell us more about fleets looking to go electric in Republic of Ireland and the process there, any incentives that are available as well.
Yeah, Ireland is probably a little bit different in that most of our incentives are geared towards private individuals. So it's, in some ways, we're making it harder for businesses to make the transition, but there is a de minimis funding grant there, value of €200,000, which equates to about 52 vehicles. Now that's only available to commercial vehicles as well. Now, it sounds like, quite a good scheme, and it is, but it's on a rolling basis as well. So if you need 52 vehicles and you acquire 52 year one, you're then blocked out of that scheme for another 3 years until you enter year 4. Now you can also use part of it in year 1, year 2, year 3, which is probably the way to do it if you were. Excuse me. From a leasing perspective, there's not really any support, because obviously the leasing company is the purchaser. And obviously, again, that 52 vehicle support would apply to the leasing company, but 52 vehicles in the grand scheme of a fleet company is not very many. In our own case, we would have over 3,000 electric vehicles in our fleet now. And probably uniquely as well, we're kind of 50% passenger, 50% commercial as well. That's partly driven probably by kind of your last mile delivery kind of customer. We're lucky enough to have the Irish Postal Service on our fleet, and we also have some last mile delivery companies, Amazon to name one. So they would make up a fairly substantial amount for our commercial fleet. And then the other half, as I say, is mainly car derived. But we've done a big push ourselves where we're moving towards trying to get our whole order bank moved to be pure electric vehicle only by 2030. We're well on the way to that now. Our current order book would be sitting at about 30% EV orders. And a good bulk of that again would be commercial. It's nearly again a 50-50 split, commercial and passenger vehicle. But I suppose what we would probably try to do is, again, as Jim said, right vehicle, right time, right place. That's very important. So we would spend probably more time talking about why a company wants to make the switch and making sure that they're doing it at the right time for them, with the right drivers and the right vehicles, rather than just, somebody saying, yes, we want to go. We don't just push them all down that avenue. If it's not the right time, we have to be upfront and say that to them as well.
Yeah, two interesting takeaways there. One, there's arguably less incentives available to the end customer when leasing, but there is still plenty of demand from businesses for leased electric vehicles because they've sat down and obviously it works for them. They, for whatever reason, they prefer to lease rather than own outright. So good to see that business is thriving there. And two, very much echoing what Jim said as well. It's obvious that Lease Plan's not just interested in leasing or selling the vehicle. They actually do want to make sure that it is the right vehicle for the right job and help you with the associated charging infrastructure and all the advice you need. That's great to see. It's not just like they're only interested in your money. They'll actually help you in that process, and that is great to see. Which brings us neatly on to Gareth from Etrux, because you have a very holistic model when it comes to electrifying fleets, don't you?
Yeah, we're relatively new as a company, but we've been going about 18 months now, and we have a fleet of just over 200 vehicles on the road at the moment. Primarily, like Jim mentioned earlier, the commercial sphere isn't really moving as quickly as past cars, so we're finding that the right vehicle isn't there for commercial customers. But we're doing our practice on diesels at this stage, because the commercial market, you need to get the payload, you need to have the right vehicle for the job. So we have our own composites division here. So we're looking at a lot of lightweighting and stuff like that. We do the conversions on site and then provide them to customers across the British Isles, UK, Ireland. And then we have an Evolve program, which is our consultancy side. And we're that one shop stop as well, where we've teamed up with some partners who run algorithms, and that can be on a fleet from a couple of vehicles up to thousands, and we determine which vehicles are the right ones to change, what's available out there to change to, and where they need to move their infrastructure to, so we can heat map where they need their charging infrastructure, where they need maybe hydrogen. Some of our private customers have access to hydrogen mining, and where to have that on access. And then obviously, Aaron was saying there about the leasing, where we've accessed some financing companies that are very green in their outlook. And there's a whole new way of looking at how to finance a fleet, or whether that's one vehicle up to the thousands, because at the end of the life, there's decisions to be made that are different than with an internal combustion engine powered vehicle. So you're looking at recycling the batteries. We've got a company under our umbrella that does that. We're working with partners into chassis recycling as well. So this all makes the financial model totally different. And again, we see that as part of the whole picture in selling EVs and alternative fuel vehicles to customers. And I think there will be a change of mindset from a lot of commercial fleet operators, where they're going to have to move from CapEx to OpEx in their spending, because the initial hit, the sticker shock is there at the minute for a lot of people. And that's where they need to maybe look at budgetary configuration to get over that.
Really interesting stuff, that, and great to see that you're looking right ahead to the end of life as well. When it comes to the circular economy, EVs have a very kind of smart role to play. So it's good to see companies that are actively engaging in that. And also, in terms of the Northern Irish commercial electric vehicle sector being a bit behind, well, I mean, that's obviously because the charging infrastructure is a lot behind. But if you can charge at your depot, I had a quick sort of double check on Google Maps before we came on this call. So Northern Ireland is about 100 miles east to west and 130 miles north to south, if I remember correctly. Yep. So that's not insurmountable for certainly modern electric passenger cars, the majority of which can do 200 plus miles per charge. Vans are catching up. The Ford e-Transit springs to mind, and some of the latest offerings from Maxus. So unless you are doing stupidly high mileage, that means that you genuinely do need to rapid charge at specific public points. If you can depot charge overnight, chances are that even commercial vehicles will be perfect for you in Northern Ireland. So definitely check that out. But of course, Etrux is one of the many companies that will be able to assist on that. So that's great to see. And I suppose that when it comes to incentives that are available in Scotland, in Northern Ireland, and the Republic of Ireland, if we start with Scotland and we bring in Michael, thanks for joining us. When it comes to commercial vehicles of various different sorts, I understand that Scotland has been quite far ahead of the game when it comes to grants in the past. Tell us more about what's available today for EVs, and we'll come on to their charging infrastructure later on. But if we focus on the EVs at the moment, what kind of business available of at the moment?
Yeah, sure. So certainly, over the years, Transport Scotland has put a lot of funding towards supporting businesses. At the moment, it's mainly interest-free loans. So businesses, smaller businesses can get up to £90,000 over sort of various vehicles. Larger businesses maybe up to 150,000, and that would be 30,000 for a car, up to 35 for a van, and above that for a larger commercial vehicle. And the use case we need to look at in terms of cars, because we don't really, or Scottish Government are not really keen to be giving out lots of money for sort of CEOs to do 4,000 mile a year in the Tesla. But if we make sure that that vehicle is doing 15,000 miles, or it's got a particular use case that we can justify, yeah, this definitely makes sense. Then there's funding for cars, but certainly for vans, as you mentioned, so light commercials, and taxis. A lot of MG5s on the road, particularly in Edinburgh, and for Hackney cabs, LEVCs as well. We can fund pretty much the full amount of the vehicle for LEVCs.
Am I right in saying that there have been tranches of grants available for bigger vehicles as well? I seem to remember there being bus funding. Probably Keith can come in on this as well, which certainly will have assisted greatly with quite a lot of the electric buses we're starting to see in Scotland.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, it's mainly the loans that I deal with. There are other pockets of funding come in for specific areas. There was earlier in the year there was a tranche of money put aside for businesses that were in for people visiting the country, the tourist industry, etc. So yeah, there's occasionally other support available.
Good to hear. And in terms of Northern Ireland, I understand that it's basically restricted to whatever OZEV, so in other words, kind of UK-wide funding is doing. Out of the incentives that have been mentioned, obviously there was a focus on the Scottish funding for commercial vehicles, etc. Do you happen to remember the kind of UK-wide stuff that's kind of split out from that would assist in Northern Ireland? And again, I would bring in Gareth if you're aware of these incentives as well.
I think in terms of legislation and incentives, unfortunately here in Northern Ireland, our local government can't get its act together and sit around the table at the minute. So where we're finding that there are mainland GB and Republic of Ireland are maybe following the European guidelines on certain legislation. Here in Northern Ireland, that isn't being implemented. And yes, some of the sort of UK grants are available here, but I think there needs to be more of a push to help a lot of businesses here in Northern Ireland, because I think there's a lot of fear around infrastructure for them. Our customers over in the mainland on GB don't have that same level of concern.
True. Actually, that's a good point. The next webinar in the Faster series, which will be on 7th of December at 9 a.m., it's at 11 a.m. even, we'll look at EV charging infrastructure in Northern Ireland. And I'm reliably informed that there are some big developments coming from the private sector, actually. And of course, the Faster project will be doing its part as well with the installation of tens of rapid chargers too. So help is coming on the public side of things. But I agree that, yeah, there could be additional incentives, looking at how generous things have been in Scotland, but also in the Republic of Ireland. Now, Zero Emission Vehicles Ireland sadly couldn't make it today because they're at the same EV summit that Aaron's at as well, but Aaron has very kindly dipped out of it to join this webinar today. Aaron, no worries if you don't have the details off the top of your head, because I do have them on a screen in front of me, but do you recall off the top of your head any incentives that are available for commercial vehicles in Republic of Ireland?
Yeah, as I say, there is that €3,800 grant for company buying directly, and then we kind of have a blanket level of incentives after that are open to everybody. So passenger vehicles have VRT relief, vehicle registration tax relief, one of many taxes that we pay here that no other country pays. We won't get into that too much. Now on commercial vehicles, it's small, it's only €200, you pay it anyway. But on passenger vehicles, it can be quite high, depending on the value. It could be €3,000–4,000 on most vehicles that qualify. Anything up with an open market price above €50,000 wouldn't qualify. But then, excuse me, you also qualify for very low road tax. The lowest road tax payable annually, €120. There's also a toll incentive. As a commercial operator, you can claim back €1,000 per vehicle on tolls, $500 for a private individual. And then there is also grants around charging, mainly around home chargers. You can obtain a €600 grant from the SEI, which falls under ZEBI. And that they've recently changed that, so it's much more open than it used to be. You don't even need a vehicle anymore. You used to have a vehicle to claim the grant. And they've extended it to apartments and vehicles with no driveways as well. There's actually Electricity are exhibiting here today. They're the guys that do the lamppost chargers. There's a few on trial here in Ireland at the moment, not many, but that's something that people are probably keen to explore as well. Outside of that, there's not really a whole lot. There probably is one or two other small areas where there are incentives available, but they're quite blanket, as say, in general, and then specifically to commercial operators, there's not a whole lot, unfortunately.
No, but nonetheless, that's useful to know. Thank you. And when you mention Ubitricity's lamppost charge points, I'm going to call it now. The next comment in the chat will be from Heather at Connected Curb saying, we also do on-street charging infrastructure. But speaking of which, actually, Kevin's mentioned that he's got some MG5s available in stock at the moment, which are very popular as taxis. Speaking of taxis, I understand that Zero Emission Vehicles Ireland also has very generous grants available for electric taxis. So if you have a small public service vehicle, the likes of a taxi, then you can get a grant of up to €10,000 towards one. And if you need to convert it to wheelchair accessibility, you get an extra €2,500. This is where it gets interesting, because if you also scrap an old dirty diesel whilst you're at it, the grant is doubled. So up to €20,000 for a conventional taxi or private hire vehicle, or well, basically, small public service vehicle, or up to €25,000 if you need to do any wheelchair accessibility modifications. So that's very generous for that sector. Very impressive to see. And yeah, I did notice that bit about the home charging grants as well, Aaron. Thank you very much for your local insight on that one. It's very much appreciated. I think it's time for our next poll, actually, before we move on to incentives that are available for charging infrastructure itself. So next poll that we have, please, Sharon. Where did you go to get information on EVs prior to electrifying your fleet? So there we go. Did you speak to people who'd already done it? Did you speak to vehicle fleet providers, the likes of Jim or Gareth or Aaron today, charging infrastructure providers, specialist organisations like Energy Saving Trust or Home Energy Scotland? Did you have a chat with Michael? Would you have a chat with Michael after this? And then, actually, if you're feeling particularly confident, you can say absolutely nowhere because I know about this stuff already. And actually, there's a few people who already have said that, which is fair play. Good to see some knowledgeable people on the session today. I'll give you 5 more seconds to answer that, and then we'll share the results so everyone can have a look-see. But yeah, I would say, there seems to be a lot of keenness to learn from people who've already done it. And I think that's the extra importance of having Kevin and Keith and Bruce on the call today. And we'll be coming back to their story with their electric fleets in a little minute. But before we do, I'd be interested to find out about more funding that's available for charging infrastructure in depots. Now, that might change depending on whether you are a local authority or a private business. And I'd be interested to find out any kind of differences between those two. So starting again with the Scotland specific and then UK-wide incentives that are available. Michael, if we come back to yourself to remind us what the charging infrastructure incentives are like.
Sure, yeah. For small and medium enterprises, if they're in rural areas, there's grants available up to 50% for charging infrastructure. That's categories 5, 6, 7, and 8, which is the urban rural classifications. So if you're within that area, then up to 50%. If you're not, if you're a third sector organisation, there's up to 75% grants. And there's information on the Energy Saving Trust website and sort of a postcode finder to check if you would be eligible for that. So that's the main sort of direction of that funding at the moment. What I will also say that Energy Saving Trust can offer, as we were just sort of mentioning about sharing best practice with other businesses. There's regular forums for fleet decarbonisation, both for public sector and private sector, which I might get a chance to touch on a bit more later as well. But that's definitely something that everybody's very welcome to come along to as well.
Do you know what? If you've got any links for that, post it in the chat as well for sure, because this will be something that will be saved, and it would be great to be able to share that with everyone as well. And yeah, it's interesting you mentioned there's the OZEV funding, so it's £500 per per bay that is. It can even be passive provision, doesn't need to be active provision. In other words, you put the ducting in for it, ready to install something later on. But then £350 per socket that's installed up to that 75% cost, as you say. Interesting you mentioned that, because only yesterday I was having a chat with the team at Hubelian who have the Trio charge point, which is a wall box that has 3 sockets on it, and what it does is it takes a 7 kilowatt power supply and it will automatically charge 1 car at 7 kilowatts, 2 at 3.5, or 3 at 2.3 kilowatts each. So it's quite a neat way of getting around a constrained grid supply. Or if you have one old busted charge point that's on the wall, you can replace it with one that's got 3. They've now been given the permission to be on that approved list for the £350 a socket. So up to 75%, of course, you get £1,050 off of this one wall box. That's pretty cool how that's worked out. I just thought that was quite interesting. But yeah, in terms of infrastructure funding in the Republic of Ireland, Aaron, you touched upon the home charge point, €600. Are you aware of any funding that's been agreed by the newly established ZEVI that is still kind of settling down and working things out with regards to fleets and businesses?
Again, not really anything specific to fleets or businesses, but local authorities is one that they have now announced. The likes of lamppost chargers, etc. They're now funding 75% of the capital cost per socket, capped to €5,000 for local authorities to roll out chargers. Now, if it happens to be a lamppost charger with 2 sockets, they're essentially giving them €10,000 per lamppost, which is a very good figure to put out there. I say again, for businesses, there's not a whole lot there. There's not really a focus on anything that's fast charging or any kind of more than your standard kind of 7 to 11 kilowatt outside of local authorities. We have a couple of private companies that are focusing in that space a bit more, but obviously you're into funding that yourself essentially at that point. So yeah, unfortunately for kind of fleet, there's not a whole lot, but we would work with fleets ourselves and kind of come up with a good solution. We have a one-stop solution for our clients where it's essentially a one card does all in some regards, because our public charging network is behind in that we don't have many players. It actually makes it far simpler. there's really two big players that make up 90% of the public charging infrastructure. And we have a solution that can have one card basically that starts and stops a log starter for home charging, public charging and office charging. And we also are able to reimburse the driver directly for home charging costs. So similar to a traditional fuel card. And then obviously their public charging costs are then billed through their company. So the driver is never out of pocket. They're actually getting reimbursed ahead of even receiving their electricity bill. So you could argue that they're technically in credit. And then obviously we can report that monthly down to the client, and we can include that as part of the lease as well. So we don't just finance the vehicle, we can also include the cost of the charging equipment. So we don't include, say, the cost for the service within that, but certainly the hardware we do. So I think that's a very good solution we have there as well.
That's really impressive. And it's actually answered the next question I had, which was to do with when fleets are charged out and about on public charging infrastructure, is there a kind of fuel card that's available? So you've basically kind of alluded to that, whether it's for home charging or for public charging. I believe there's something similar that's just been released in Scotland as well. Jim, am I right in saying that there's there are multiple fuel card options available for fleets using public charging infrastructure?
Yeah, there's a variety of options, Euan. Things like the power card is becoming incredibly popular. That's like the equivalent of what we call a multi-brand card. So lots of networks on the power card. Allstar also have a fuel card offering. They have a stake in Mina. So Aaron was talking about expenses reclaim. So the Mina solution is very similar to that. But if you've got drivers using their home charger for business power, then that can be redirected back to the business. So that's really neat. And there's a variety of other networks who will offer you a card. We are looking just now at somebody who can give us both petrol, diesel and energy within one card. And again, from a convenience perspective for people making this transition, that's got a place for a period of time. So there's lots of options out there.
Brilliant to hear. And one final question, which I'll kind of throw open to the floor for this part of the webinar. So when it comes to charging infrastructure for fleets that's been installed on third-party land, I know that there are some fleet managers here to whom that would apply, but were there any issues that were encountered? How easy was that to overcome? Similarly, any fleet providers, if you're aware of situations where a business that runs a fleet of vehicles has had to install charging infrastructure on someone else's land, do please raise your hand and we'd be interested to hear from you. As I say, I'm happy enough for any fleet managers to whom that applies to say that's a bit commercially sensitive. I can't say too much, but do please fire on in if you've got any experience on that. Anyone want to take that one? That's all right, no worries. As I say, I'm aware that there is some sort of commercial sensitivity around it, but basically, long story.
Maybe I could just chime in quickly on that.
Yeah.
I think the challenge a lot of the time, I mean, it's not directly, we're not exactly, fleet manager in that sense, but I think the challenge with installing charging infrastructure on either somebody else's land, if you're talking about leasing land, or if you're talking about taking a portion of land on a larger site, maybe on a new development or something like that. Certainly it's something we've looked into, putting that charging infrastructure in near new housing developments or near new commercial developments. A big problem there has been getting a way leave for a substation to be installed, and understanding how that substation is affecting, what the landlord wants. And in fact, it's asking them, the DNO is really asking them for a 60 to 100-year lease on a 5 by 5 meter parcel of land, which from a commercial perspective hasn't been particularly attractive to a lot of landlords, because they don't really want to give that away just to enable a substation to be there. And so that kind of has been one of the challenges we've come across in terms of trying to install charging infrastructure on someone else's land or on public land.
That's a really good point, actually, because it's one thing, with the landlord being happy enough with the actual charge point or charge area, but yeah, the substation side of things is going to be increasingly important. Although I do understand that certainly in the UK, the national grid is actively looking to bolster the distribution and the transmission network in more kind of problematic rural parts of the trunk road network, for example, to try and enable high power charging hubs, which will help a lot of electric fleets. So watch this space. We are starting to see an increasing amount of high power charging infrastructure coming in. In fact, only yesterday, there were some exciting developments to do with Apple Green installing high power chargers at Abington services in Scotland, and then just down the road at Gretna as well, which has been desperately needing that for some time. So yeah, progress is coming thick and fast. And as I said, stay tuned for next month's webinar in Northern Ireland as well. You'll find out there's some big progress coming there too. But yeah, I suppose, thank you for that input, Keith. We'll now kind of come back to fleets, but before we do, poll 4, please, if possible, Sharon. I'd be interested to find out fleet managers' experience with public charging, or well, with your own charging infrastructure thus far. You know, have you found it to be reliable in terms of the stuff that you own yourself? Have you found it to be reliable, but you predominantly use public charging infrastructure, or have you had issues with either your own kind of predominantly depot charging infrastructure or public charging infrastructure? I'll give you 10 more seconds to answer that one. Interesting that the one kind of negative answer on this has been to do with charging infrastructure at the fleet manager's own depot. So I'd be interested to find out more about that in the chat to see what the issue is, because I think there's some important lessons to be learned for other fleet managers looking to obtain their own charging infrastructure, because obviously there are some companies that will say all the nice things and then deliver stuff that's absolutely terrible that needs to get ripped out again. There are some cowboys in the space, but there are a lot of very good players as well. So yeah, do tell us more. The person who said about it being unreliable would be interested to find out more. But yeah, in terms of coming back to our fleet managers, if we start with Kevin this time, and have a look at the kind of the performance, the reliability, the running costs, and also the feedback from your drivers. How has that experience with having an electric fleet been in comparison to its petrol and diesel predecessors?
And the actual experience of EVs, it's actually made more drivers want to own them, because almost I'd say with EVs, the best way to get someone to actually like them is actually get them in to drive one. You know, actually driving these, people find them a lot easier and stuff. I mean, the costs have been significantly lower until recently. Obviously, recently the energy costs on our sites are potentially 75 pence a kilowatt hour, which only that does pose a problem for a lot of fleet managers here, because we've been doing them mainly on cost. But if you're paying those sort of energy costs, you could go out and get a little petrol pool car, which would in theory be cheaper to run. So it's a constant battle we've got to fight against the climate change. Luckily, with the national parks perspective, it's obviously the ability to be a green organisation trumps that. But it's always a constant battle trying to convince people that actually there's an environmental benefit, because the days seem to at the moment be numbered that we can just do it on cost grounds. Because actually, when you add the high sticker price to commercial energy rates, it's a bit difficult, but I think hopefully those will be resolved, because we really need to decouple renewables from other costs.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We need to be removing the cost of gas from the cost of electricity. But that said, if you've got on-site renewables, then EVs remain pretty cheap to run. When the wind is blowing and the sun is shining, or when your grid storage battery that's been powered off of those renewables is able to provide back. So
yeah, that's the important thing. That's why we've always linked it with renewables. My advice to sort of fleet managers would be never do it alone. Always think about the total infrastructure. So look at solar and renewables, because you will take the edge off that. You need to actually, don't think of EVs in isolation. They're part of an infrastructure which combines charging, vehicle to grid in the future, and solar and renewables.
Absolutely. And you cannot do that trick with petrol or diesel. I mean, technically you could use it to make synthetic petrol or diesel, but you'd require 6 times the amount of energy plus the equipment to actually produce that. So it's always going to be cheaper to go down the battery option than anything else, really. So yeah, that's some really good advice there. Thank you, Kevin. Bruce, of course, from a local authority perspective, electricity costs might be somewhat different if you're on a sort of an existing sort of long-term local authority tariff. But how have you found the savings to be, and the performance and the reliability with your fleet that you've had for many a year now?
Yeah. So work-wise, the energy process we have in place is obviously providing the same just now in the fuel costs, and we can keep that cost charge per kilowatt at a reasonable rate and absorb it through the corporate network, which for the local authority that brings benefit. Reliability-wise, second to none, to be honest. Very little issues with the fleet that we've had, and we've had previously as well. Technology advancements have improved that process. Dealership support can be a little bit challenging, but I think everybody's finding that in all markets, whether it's an ICE vehicle or a BEV. Performance-wise, the users adopt them very quickly. And one of the big projects we did at the very beginning was that transition for electric pool cars for everyone, which incentivized people getting in using the vehicles and getting a taste for them. i3s were the original vehicle that went into place to kick off the pool cars, and that was kind of adopted really quickly. So we've had a lot of positive uptake from that, which has then enticed some of the employees to actually transition themselves to EVs for personal use. So for me, that was the big selling point for that, was to get people on board, get them using it, and then making that transition themselves. Where the complex the local authority comes in is actually service changes and making services operate on an electric model, and that's the bit we're transitioning just now with. So we just invested another 19 cars into the fleet coming in shortly, pushing towards our public sector objectives of 25. So that model change in service use is the challenging part, and that's where we need the initial buy-in from the adoption by users from using the cars and the light vehicles to make that bigger transition upwards. So, you know, when you come into the 3.5 ton van market, which has limited resource, and then up into the heavy sector as well. So, you know, we've trialed electric RCVs. We've talked about processes in roads vehicles to make that transition as well. So there's lots of things exciting that can happen there. Cost being the big stimulus, which causes the headaches there, but the appetite from the authority is there to make that transition. It's just about how we sort of make that phased approach and make those costs coming in. But certainly from a maintenance perspective of the vehicles, the cost to running, I would say was probably 1 year half normal running costs for a diesel vehicle, because we see them very seldom. Very little issues with breakdowns, and touch wood, never had one route in electricity, so that's always a positive.
Superb. And of course, that's, you know, you're in a fairly kind of rural council area. You might be right next door to Edinburgh, but it is very much kind of towns, villages, and hamlets. So that's, and of course, then there's the A1 running straight through the heart of East Lothian. So that's quite impressive that even in the earlier days, nobody ran out of electricity. So yeah, good to hear. But I suppose, you know,
sorry. One of the points Jim touched on was the long distance user vehicle. And we do have a couple of the 40,000-50,000 a year vehicles, and that's where the real question mark comes into that operational process. So how do you make a vehicle that needs to run 24/7 electric? And that's probably one of the biggest headaches coming forward. And going for that rapid charge model on a regular basis, that degradation and lifespan of the vehicle. So they're all interesting facts that are coming into play now, and will no doubt plus in the next few years.
Yeah, I mean, what I would say from an electrochemical perspective, and I'm sure Keith would agree from his own experience of constantly rapid charging high mileage vehicles, is that modern battery tech has improved so much, as has thermal management, that even if you're repeatedly rapid charging an electric vehicle, yes, there will be increased degradation versus one that's, you know, charged at 7 or 11 kilowatts off of an AC wall box. But that said, you know, that degradation will be over hundreds and hundreds of thousands of miles, and it will be minimal over that kind of period, because the batteries are being kept at their optimal temperature, because that extra heat is being removed, because the BMS, battery management system, is keeping such a close eye on minute bits of feedback. You know, battery management systems are becoming so much more advanced, to the point that, you know, it's not like an original Nissan Leaf that didn't have any thermal management and had cells that weren't very heat tolerant and then died a death quite quickly. You know, these are you know, well-built machines. I mean, even the kind of early BMW i3s from 2013 tend to still be going quite strong on the original battery, because it's liquid cooled. That's using chemistry from the early 2010s. You know, the stuff now that's from the early 2020s will be even better. So that said, you know, when it comes to some of the, as you say, when you move into the larger vehicles where it's more kind of hand-built, if you wish, rather than large OEMs, you need to make sure that the people know what they're doing when they build it, and make sure there's proper thermal management, etc. But I am quietly confident that you'll be fine with that kind of high, you know, routine kind of rapid charging process. But in terms of, from a local authority perspective, if you were to give advice to any kind of laggard local authority that's taking a long time to get into electric vehicles, Inverclyde Council, what would you say to them? What would be that one bit of advice that you would give them?
Well, I think for a lot of people it was the opportunity to capitalise on the Transport Scotland Fund initially, and taking up that lease solution. where now you're looking at your 5-year strategy for your fleet and replacement, you need to be looking at that objective to get that brought into there and making that transition now. Certainly, we're taking the model shift towards capital purchase away from that lease. This means we can sweat the asset longer. And I think the big selling point for me is for a normal vehicle, you take over 5 years, you can now extend that to 7 or 8. You've got warranties that are meeting that range. So it gives you a little bit of reassurance. You've got support along the way. So for me, it was making that strong. And from the local authority perspective, is taking your elected members on the journey with you. I think getting them the buy-in has been a big selling point for us. So getting in early stages, getting that initial buy-in, getting that transition across, and then getting service users on board takes them on the journey. And again, a strong public network helps support your fleet network as well. So we've really benefited from the advancements of a public network, which also allows our fleet network to utilise it as well. So that's a chicken and egg process, I suppose, but it really helped us expand the range and get that flexibility across the fleet we're looking for.
That's solid advice. Thank you, Bruce. And finally, on the kind of top tips for anyone looking to go into this, and also kind of feedback from your drivers and from from obviously running very high mileage electric buses, Keith. I'm interested to hear. I mean, obviously Ember has only ever done electric, so it might be difficult to kind of judge against diesel counterparts. But how much are you saving? How envious are other bus companies of what you're doing, and how happy are your drivers who've obviously all come from diesel driving backgrounds now that they're driving electric and manually charging the electric vehicles as well, doing the plugging and unplugging and so on? How are they finding it? What's the feedback been?
So I think, as you say, we don't have a diesel benchmark to compare to. When we started, we were kind of all electric from the beginning. And so whilst you can get some industry stats, you can speak to some people about what they're paying, per mile or per kilometre on maintenance, to build up an idea. Ultimately, we don't have a direct comparison ourselves. What I can say is that our vehicles have been extremely reliable. We have regular maintenance, regular safety checks that are going on, things like battery balancing, making sure, because of the mileages that we're doing are so high, making sure that we're looking after the batteries. And overall, we've had very, very few problems, being able to monitor things like you were saying, really, like battery temperatures, motor temperatures, monitoring those things very closely. Means that we are picking up kind of leading indicators of any potential issues and kind of resolving them very, very quickly where they do come up. And ultimately, we've been on a journey where we've kind of gone into the unknown. And so, when we speak to Yutong or CATL, who provide the batteries, we talk about what we've been doing with our battery packs. It's a new one for them. They have not seen vehicles doing this style of rapid charging before, or doing this high mileage before. And so they've been very interested to kind of get the feedback and see the performance. And overall, I'm sure that it's lower cost than diesel. I just don't know what that difference would be. For our drivers, I think what we say to them and the feedback that we get from them also is that we don't want it to be particularly different from driving any other bus. We want it to be reliable. We want them to get in. We want them to be able to drive it without worrying about things like range. And that's where I think there needs to be a bit of a mindset shift in terms of understanding that, if you're going to get back with 15%, you don't need to be panicking that you're going to get back with 15%. We have all the models that are working in the background. That means that's plenty of buffer. We're still talking about having 30, 40, 50 miles of range, really, anyway. And so for them, it's just getting comfortable that these journeys can be done, and that we have done all the calculations on the back end to know that if you're departing with, let's say, 81% state of charge, you'll have plenty of buffer to get back. And it's about trusting those models and about trusting the calculations behind those models. And I think once people get very comfortable with that, then it is just like driving any other vehicle. You can make the trip, you don't need to worry, and you get back and you plug it in and it goes on charge. That bit, the final bit of it going on charge, I think we have seen a big difference between the quality of chargers and the different brands of chargers that are in the market, with some being much, much less reliable than others. And so, from our perspective of being able to plug in and it just goes on charge, we have seen that, but we've also seen the other side of it where you plug in and it doesn't go on charge, and you try again and it doesn't go on charge. And then basically, you've maybe tried 5 or 6 times and it still isn't going on charge. But but there's no explanation for it. And that's what we have seen with the circuit control chargers specifically, where we just have these random stops or it just doesn't go on charge. Whereas with the Alpatronic ones that we've installed, we have just never seen that. You plug it in, it's like your kettle at home. You turn your kettle on, your kettle boils. With the Alpatronic chargers, you plug it in and it just starts charging every single time. And with the circuit control ones, we just have not seen that. It's been quite the opposite. So there is a kind of wide variety there, I would say, of kind of quality on the charging side.
Yeah, agreed on that. Definitely. I've seen that whole story kind of unfold. So as soon as you mentioned it, you just sort of saw the wry smile off one side of my face. But no, it's so true, because CCS, so for anyone who doesn't know, a combined charging system, the one that looks like a squashed hourglass, the rapid charging format that most electric vehicles use, it's a horribly defined format. So the actual kind of protocol, the set of rules that it follows, it's almost like they've given the manufacturers of the cars and the chargers the ingredients to make a cake, but not the recipe. So some of them make French toast and then they wonder why it doesn't work. And Circuit Control freaking loves French toast, apparently, when it comes to Ember's electric buses. But yeah, Alpatronic, as you say, you know, you're just constantly beasting that charger and it's never skipping a beat. There are other very good brands out there as well, of course, and there are some that have issues, but I would hope that eventually the issues that have been had with some of those circuit control units would be resolved. But yeah, I'm aware that it's been a painful teething process, but now that you've got,
I think you know, one of the things, you know, what I would say is that it's always best to look at what is working rather than looking at the one that isn't working and saying, oh, that's representative of the market. I think it's much better to look at the one which is working and say, hey, look, it can charge, you know, multiple vehicles multiple times per day at full charge, and there are no problems with that. And take that as your sort of baseline and say that's where we should be building from, rather than saying, oh, electric charging is unreliable because one particular charger brand is unreliable. That doesn't apply to the market. It's not like the technology or the underlying technology is unreliable. That is reliable. It's the implementation of it and particular specifications which are just not working well.
Yeah. No, well said, well said. And it's, I think you've basically hit the nail on the head, and it almost is something that the audience is already aware of, having had a look at that earlier poll result, where they said that a lot of the fleet managers spoke to other fleet managers who'd already gone electric to find out what works and what doesn't. And it's definitely worth doing your due diligence. Otherwise, you end up with either vehicles that aren't fit for purpose, or a purchase / leasing / procurement arrangement that just doesn't quite work out in comparison to what some of your counterparts have got. Or, you know, as I say, just stuff that, like, infrastructures that's been put in that annoyingly just doesn't work with your vehicles, and you don't know why. But if you'd spoken to this other company that already figured it out, then you would have found out. So yeah, definitely speak to those in the know and do your due diligence. That is a fantastic bit of advice. Thank you, Keith. I'm aware, actually, we have actually overrun. So if anyone does need to drop off, we're almost done anyway, but if anyone does need to drop off, I will not be offended. Thank you to all of our panelists today. We do have one final poll, Sharon, if possible. I'm looking for advice, looking for feedback from fleet managers. How have your drivers reacted to electric vehicles in your fleet versus their petrol, diesel or hybrid predecessors? Have they been positive? Have they been sort of about the same, or have they been negative? If so, say why in the chat. And whilst the answers for that are coming in, I suppose the final topic to discuss, which I'll just kind of throw open to the wider panel, any top tips that you have for anyone looking to electrify their fleets to go and access information? I mean, Michael, you obviously already mentioned Home Energy Scotland. I believe you put the details in the chat as well. But anyone on this panel, any other top tips where to go to get advice on electric fleets and the infrastructure for them? Whether it's Scotland, Northern Ireland or Republic of Ireland. I suppose we've covered everything. Fair play. And what we'll do is we'll end the poll now, have a quick look at the results. But yeah, what I would say is, obviously, you know, there's the Energy Saving Trust Scotland website, or actually, that's a point, Michael, is it still technically called Energy Saving Trust Scotland, or for fleets, or would it be a different website? Oh, you're on mute, just so you know.
Classic, yeah, unmute. Yeah, if they go to the Energy Saving Trust website, you'll be able to navigate your way around. But the link that I put in the chat is an email specifically for fleet decarbonisation, and so that would get you to somebody who could then either point you towards public sector or private, and you hopefully find the right person who can help you.
Superb. Thank you very much. I'll just quickly share the results. So basically, pretty much everyone's been positive. There's been one negative. We'll find out in the chat why that was shortly. But yeah, as also there's the Office for Zero Emission Vehicles website for kind of wider UK advice. And then there's Zero Emission Vehicles Ireland or gov.ie for advice in the Republic of Ireland as well. Certainly, I've had a browse of those websites. They've been most informative when it comes to like workplace
and the
charging grants.
SEAI website as well for Ireland. It's falls under ZEVI as well. It's more, the SEAI has the website, ZEVI has very little on it just yet.
Fair play. Yeah. Yeah, it's because they've literally just kind of moved into their new government department, haven't they? They're still unpacking their boxes.
Yeah,
and so
they're
on.
more at the what are we doing stage than
yeah,
doing anything yet. There are a lot of polls and things like that. So it's kind of
fair
still
play.
being driven by the SEAI currently.
Good shout. Thank you, Aaron. That's really good. And I suppose actually, well, we can hand over to the Q&A as such. But a bit of feedback on sort of negative driver experience. Range of the vehicle didn't suit the work and rural area of the operation. That will change as modern, higher power, longer range electric vehicles come out. And also, there was a bit of feedback on charging infrastructure. So David McLeod had said about compared to access to petrol and diesel fuel stations, sometimes the infrastructure in the depot was a bit unreliable. Main problems were the loss of signal and delays in getting technical support when there was a technical issue. So actually, that's a good point. Kevin, you are very much out in the sticks when it comes to your charging infrastructure. How have you managed to maintain signal strength and to ensure that if there is a fault, that it's fixed quickly?
I mean, that's one of the difficulties we've got, is a lot of the public infrastructure uses mobile SIMs to do the payment or charging for charging. So our depot is the most reliable one because it's a hardwired connection, but we found it really difficult because actually that's one of the issues we have is our public charging in some of our visitor centres is still free of charge because we can't get a good enough signal to charge for the charging. But that was fine when you were on low tariffs, but there is the potential for us to cost us £60 if someone parks in our car park if they charge that. And what we have found is the difficulty is you will have some people who learn that and don't play fair with customers. So you'll have one vehicle which will sit on the charger for 24 hours and you have to then go through the hassle of chasing that driver up and say, please play fair. But yeah, mobile data in a rural area is difficult. The one thing I'd say, if you can hardwire your chargers, there's nothing beats an Ethernet connection because most of our sites have good off-fiber connectivity, but rubbish mobile connectivity. And a lot of the charge providers for public chargers don't take that into account. So I wish more of them installed Ethernet on them because we can do that. We can't do mobile.
Yeah, fair point. Actually, that's a really good point. The other way that I've seen that done is it was at Roy Bridge, one of the ChargePlace Scotland rapid chargers had a dedicated satellite link put in when there was no 3G signal, but now there's 4G signal, so they put a 4G SIM in and remove the satellite link. It's an expensive way to do it, but if you're hemorrhaging money on public charging sessions, then it's one way to go about it. But yeah, hardwiring is probably the cheapest option. I would have thought.
Yeah, and a lot of manufacturers don't have that option. They have 3G or 4G SIMs, and the difficulty we find in a rural area is roaming SIMs get themselves in a mess because there's weak signals from a few networks, so then they don't know which one to connect to, so they just spend their time hopping between them. And sometimes a reboot fixes it, but then weather conditions change and you go back. So yeah, I just implore all manufacturers to think, add an Ethernet port as well as a 4G one, because that's what someone's likely to be able to get.
So if you are in an area that's got dodgy signal, then specify Ethernet connection in the tender. Would be the simple solution to that. That's brilliant. Thank you, everybody. Doesn't appear to be anything in the Q&A. I think we've hopefully answered most of your questions and comments in the chat. Mark Main says he's got a 4G SIM that might be able to help if anyone would like to trial. Obviously to do with boosting signal strength on and resilience on certain charging infrastructure. But that has been an incredibly productive webinar. Lots of useful advice from all panelists. Keith has had to drop off, Keith Bradbury from Ember, but We greatly appreciate him. And thank you to everyone who's still with us. Jim Blair, Gareth Pinkerton, Aaron Callaghan, Bruce Moffat, michael.seaword and Kevin Booker. You've all been absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much for staying on a bit later as well. Sorry, I do have a tendency for this to overrun. I should have said, I should have warned in advance. Thank you as well, Sharon, for giving the update and for running things behind the scenes today. We will be back at 11 a.m. on Wednesday, the 7th of December, to discuss a very hot topic, electric vehicle charging infrastructure in Northern Ireland. Why is it so far behind? What can we do to fix it? What's coming soon? We're going to have some very big stakeholders from the Northern Ireland scene, including not just the private sector, but public sector personnel who could actually make a difference here. So that's going to be a fascinating webinar. Please do register for that. The link is on the Faster Project website, Faster EV Charge. And yeah, once again, thank you, everybody. We'll see you next month. Take care.